Hey guys and girls, Bored now, back with you. On this video I'm going to be talking about A Quiet Place Part 2, which of course was released into cinemas this week and has already made a ton of money. I believe it's doing very well at the box office. So the much anticipated horror sequel, the original film, was in 2017, and this I think originally was going to be kind of the first, or was the first big film which was pushed back because of the pandemic. This was originally going to come out in 2020, so it finally hits now, and as I said, much anticipated because the first film was a big critical success and a big hit with the fans, did very well at the box office, and one of the unexpected surprises really of the last few years, because you had the first time director John Krasinski, and obviously it had a reasonably sort of original premise. It definitely had hints of other movies we've seen before, but sort of reasonably original and quite a low budget film as well, and it proves to be a tremendous success. So there was some trepidation about this sequel, because obviously in many ways, including to the director, it felt like a one and done sort of thing. So it's obviously the challenge of how they justify a sequel, and this is going to be largely sort of spoiler free, although I might touch on one or two things. So the plot is that the family obviously are picking up the pieces following the end of the previous film, which, in case you haven't seen it, the dad, played by Quincy, did indeed die. Now, he does have a small cameo at the start of this film, and he directs the film once again, which is important. But so you've got the Emily Blunt character with obviously her new baby, but also the two children from the original film, who now play a sort of a bigger part in this film, particularly the Maleficent Simmons character, who they sort of shift the focus to her in a big way. And it's set sometime afterwards, and I guess it starts expanding on this like post-apocalyptic world and raising new questions in terms of, is there anybody out there, because up to this point and recently the family thought they were the only ones left around, but certain things start to hint that there might actually be other people out there and alive, and it just brings up questions of yeah, how important this is and how it changes things. And we also see how the family have started to adapt to the world, and as they've gone on, they've learnt from things. So they've learnt of ways to keep themselves safe, ways obviously to protect the young baby, who, yeah, obviously is, that's a vulnerable thing, having a baby in such a situation where you can't really make any noise, or you have to be very careful when and where you make the noise. And they've come up with new sort of weapons to, if they are confronted by these alien beings, to sort of fend them off. But in any case, you also have the sort of main crust of it is that they wander into a new part of town, sort of looking for answers, also believing they'll be safe there, and it turns out it's a part of town where this new character, who originally was a neighbour of theirs before all this went down, played by Cillian Murphy, and he kind of originally is reluctant to help them, says, no, you're in the wrong part of town, this is very risky. But as the film goes on, obviously he has to start working with them potentially, and there's some question marks over him. But the daughter in particular, the Maleficent Simmons character, is like determined to get answers and to find things out. So I'll just talk about that you do get like a sort of a pre sort of film thing, which is a flashback to the very first day where these things hit Earth. And it's something we haven't seen before, so it's where you get a brief cameo from John Krasinski, because it's literally on the day of the thing. And I mean, some people criticize this, I guess, because they all just think that, well, you don't really need this stuff. It's needless backstory. Just get on with the story of this sequel. Um, and it didn't really bother me. I liked it quite a bit. I think two reasons. One is it actually sets up the Cillian Murphy character, because he appears in that opening scene, and it sets him up as the neighbour. And the other thing, more importantly, is it actually gets inside the head of the daughter, her character, because of course she is deaf, and there's a couple of nice scenes where you see how the family communicate with her, and you just get inside her head experiencing this as a deaf person. And I'll say it now. I think it's a really strong sequel. I think it does what a sequel needs to do. It expands on the universe of the original film, because I guess if there's one thing where you can justify this sort of thing going on, is the fact that it's a post-apocalyptic type thing, and you obviously open it up and explore new themes and different characters, or at least expand on the characters. Um, because it's less of a horror movie in a way than the original. I think you do get sort of big horror set pieces and some effective jump scares, but it does feel maybe a bit more heavy on the set pieces rather than the sort of subtle sort of horror of the first one. And it feels maybe a bit more like a disaster movie and just general drama at times than the first film. But that's not really a complaint, because I think it is a strength that it feels different, that it complements the first film. You know, it definitely feels like this world again, but at the same time, it does its own thing. And I think that's what any sort of credible sequel needs to do. Again, you get the sense of family, and you get their dynamic, which is very sort of realistic. There's a lot of like emotional moments and just beautiful like interchanges between them. Just to talk about Emily Blunt, because she is such a versatile actress, because there are scenes in this where she gets to be like the badass Emily Blunt, which we saw a little bit in the first film, where she is there with the shotgun, and there's no finer sight in cinema really than Emily Blunt staring you down with a shotgun. And she's actually absolutely brilliant at those scenes. But also, then there's the scenes for a lot of the film where she is playing the protective mother, very sort of nurturing, very sort of sweet and charming. But it does show you how versatile she is, that she convinces with those two different like parts of the character. And of course she's known for like comedy films as well, and drama, so there's many different aspects. And again, she's very good in this. I really like switching to the Mrs. Simmons character. I thought she was very good in this. Obviously she has a much more meatier role in this one, and she carries the film so well. And I think the reason it makes sense switching to her perspective more is because one of the things the film does is it actually plays up this idea of sound being important in a world where you can make virtually no sound or little sound. So again, the use of sound and the sound editing and the subtle little uses of sound and music is very effective. It's almost like a quiet sort of musical in that sense, a bit like the first film. So I think the way the director has worked with the editor and with the sound editor and the composer as well, makes for a very satisfying sort of mix and feel to it. But there is something in the background in this film where, again, I'm not going to give away plot spoilers, but sound actually does become important to the plot, and it becomes this big dramatic moment. But the whole thing about them wondering about strangers, and that comes through this idea of sound and music. So uh, that's actually a big reason why it makes sense to focus so much on the daughter and her personal journey. And the other thing to say about that is then this does become like a coming of age style film. I mean, not completely and not all the way through, but the extra focus on her and also the Miles Jupp, or the sorry, Noah Jupp. Miles Jupp is a comedian. The Noah Jupp character, their sort of focus and their coming of age, uh, that becomes a sort of an important theme of the film, and you really believe in them and follow them. Particularly the daughter, as I said, she sort of grabs your attention more, maybe. But that's another thing I like, the coming of age. And again, that's what you have to do in a sequel. You have to show these characters growing and changing in this world. And I think, again, it raises the stakes. It says, yeah, these characters have moved on and now they're starting to look for greater answers. They're starting to just change as a result of the fact that obviously, like, these kids have lost their dad, and at the same time, because they've been in this situation for such a long time, they're starting to question things and looking for further answers. So the coming of age factor is very effective, and I think we get sort of good characters, and also Cillian Murphy is like perfectly cast in his role because he is the sort of actor you like cast as someone who's quite sort of brooding and sort of shadowy and has that sort of aspect where it's very hard to read him, where you're not quite sure if you can trust him or not. I mean, the film could have played that up a bit more. I don't think they play it up that much, but it's definitely there in the background. It's there in kind of his like body language, and I think it's definitely played on at least a little bit at first with his character. Um, so it's a very effective film. Again, there's some good jump scares. I don't think it's as scary as the first one, and I think obviously if you're looking at it, if you're a hardcore horror fan, maybe you won't get as much out of it as the first one. But again, I don't think that's a problem because I think they had to move it in a different direction. And I think certainly for the most part, I think they've done that, and it's sort of worked. I would say. Um, I think as it moves on, there's certain sort of maybe convoluted moments with the plot. I think towards the end, because what sort of happens is the characters like do get split up, but there was a danger that it could get a bit convoluted with that stuff. But actually, it works well enough because you do get like these big sort of payoffs to what the film has set up earlier. So I think that's nicely done as well. And again, I think you have to say John Kawinski as a director does a really great job. I think there's something appealing about him not being in this one as much, apart from that opening scene. And that is because he actually gets to like expand his repertoire behind the camera. Uh, the direction again is very much on point. It's very sort of subtle, and it's very it's very sort of steady. I mean, there's a lot of like subtlety to the direction. There's a good sort of use of steady cam actually in the opening sort of sequences in like the flashback, and there's some beautiful sort of like visual poetry as well of this sort of world and the landscape, because actually this film does expand on it, and there's a nice sort of tracking sort of scene with the girl like going onto a train, and the way it opens up the world and sort of follows her into this train and a potential threat there. So just stuff like that. The direction's very much on point, and I think there are one or two nitpicks which maybe I've hinted at. I don't think it's as good as A Quiet Place 1, but I do think it's very good. As a sequel, I think it's satisfying, and it certainly doesn't feel like a kind of a goof out. If you say it doesn't feel like, oh, that's disappointing. I'd say it's not as good as A Quiet Place 1, but I still think it's very good. And as sequels go, it's yeah, it sort of lives up to the billing, I'd say. So that's A Quiet Place 2, which I liked a lot. Obviously, I'll give it 8 out of 10. I'm gonna stay on the positive on this, because a sequel often has to do harder work. So yeah, good job for me. I look forward to rewatching it and to rewatching the first one. So if you've seen Quiet Place Part 2, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. And also you can ring the bell on YouTube. That basically notifies you when a new video goes live, or when I go live on a live stream. But yeah, share me out on social media, because that helps to get attention on the channel. But thanks for listening. I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.